Christmas Eve 1966, we took over Sealand. There was a rope hanging down, we climbed up it. There were a couple of people there at the time, employees of one of the pirate radio station groups, and we took them ashore. A few weeks later, my father, while having a beer with a lawyer friend, came up with the idea of forming a principality, or forming an independent state. And then his next thoughts were what kind of independent state, and a principality he thought was the simplest and clearest way forward. My father said to my mother, "There, darling, you have your own island now." And she said, "It's a pity it hasn't got palm trees and a beach and everything else." He said, "No," he said, "but let's make it a country," and it went on from there. My father, he decided that a principality would be the simplest method, purely because if you make it a republic or whatever, you need parliament and law books and this, that, and the other. And he was of the opinion that as a principality, the prince's word would be the law, and he could, being just a small family, basically, as we were, he could govern things himself. And so he declared it a principality and declared himself a prince, my mother princess.
The fort itself rises 75 feet above the North Sea. It still has one of its guns on the deck, which were used to shoot at German bombers coming across the sea to bomb London. It's difficult to look like a swashbuckler climbing up a twisting rope ladder with a tugboat shifting in the rolling, frigid North Sea.
Here we are standing on the coast at Harwich, looking out towards Sealand with the promise of a gale just round the corner. The North Sea itself is a perilous piece of water. There's thousands of wrecked ships just out here. I can imagine that living out there 6 miles from Harwich is not very far, but with a big storm blowing and the perilous seas that can happen around here, it's a very isolated place. I think it's splendid that someone could set up an independent principality under their own terms. But I think it's a very British thing to do. I think it's a very wacky situation that people rather like and rather admire. I see it personally as being almost the last bastion of the British Empire, but it isn't the British Empire. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, at the moment, there's a helipad on the top, and there's several bathrooms and a living room and kitchen and washing arrangements, you know. But as you go down the towers, the first floor had, from the wartime, had generators in both towers to supply electricity for the guns.
Mrs. Bates, how is it possible to, keep looking glamorous in conditions like these?
It's no more difficult than anywhere else in the world. We're quite comfortable here. We have all the things I want. Look, makeups, brushes and things.
Well, is there anything you very much miss?
Yes, I miss a hairdresser. It's the one luxury I do miss. When I go back to England, I like to go to the hairdressers first, you know. It's something about having it done for you.
Mm. Apart from sheer cussedness and a lot of guts, what's the point of hanging on at Sealand? I mean, what are the sort of things that you could do?
Well, every state has to pay its way. And every state does this by its own enterprises and the licenses that it issues to some of these enterprises. The sort of things which we can do as an independent something is international banking, international lotteries. We have been propositioned a number of times for radio and television. We've turned them down.
The Principality is an interesting artifact. As you will have seen, it's unique. It's a country in its own right. There are people who live there. At last count, we keep a register, and at last count about 24. We have industries located in the Principality, which we need because any country must survive by creating wealth, and we have problems.
All sorts of different incidents have occurred over the years with the Royal Navy, in some cases antagonising and provoking and threatening, and one particular occasion, a shot, I believe one shot was fired in the morning. and it ended up in a court case in the United Kingdom courts. And they were, when we went to court, I fired the warning shot, and it was so long ago I can vaguely remember it. The Crown prosecutor was going on about, you know, a shot was fired, and our barrister said, well, just a minute, first of all, there's a subject of jurisdiction to consider. So the case was fought on jurisdiction. So we won the case on jurisdiction. That court case symbolised that we were on the right track and doing the right thing. It gave us a lot of credence to what we were doing.
There was a court case once where the judge ruled that Sealand was actually outside UK jurisdiction. So I suppose in that sense, Sealand has to be independent. Whether it's a country, I'm less sure about. But let's remember this. Several centuries ago, a group of people from Harwich sailed in the Mayflower to found a micronation. That became the United States. I'm quite a fan of micronations.
Is it true that you sleep with a pistol underneath your pillow?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact.
If the uninvited did land, would you use that pistol?
If I had to, yes, quite definitely.
Could I see the pistol?
Yeah, I'd rather you didn't touch it. It's got one up the spout.
In that case, I certainly won't. Could you show it to me?
Yes, certainly.
I was on Sealand on my own, and this large KLM helicopter turned up with a film crew filming out the doorway, and they lowered down two guys on a winch wire who I knew. One of them was a German tax consultant. So I took him into our living room and was talking to him, and the door got slammed. He must have jumped out the door got slammed, and a camera tripod was shoved in the door handle. And there I was, trapped in there for 3 or 4 days. There'd been a coup d'etat.
After this morning's helicopter counterattack, Mr. Roy Bates is back in power. The young Michael Bates and his accomplices this morning overpowered the Dutchman and 2 Germans who'd been left in charge. One of them, a German lawyer who's been part of the whole business venture, bore painful signs of the brief action, a black eye and a swollen and cut lip. A coup d'etat, with the deposed president winning back his country, or a squalid and violent argument between business adventurers? Whichever was the case, it's clear that the events here took place without the intervention of the British police or any other authority. And for Roy Bates, that's further assurance that Sealand is, to all intents and purposes, a law unto itself.
To talk about the relationship between Sealand and the United Kingdom, it is clear that the UK recognises us as independent. It has precious little choice. Not only physically was that the case when we were founded, but also the British courts have said so. We sit in the middle of the ocean. We struggle when the food gets low. We get frustrated when we can't get anywhere else because the sea is so rough that we have to stay in our own country. Yeah, we know we're independent because physically and economically and socially, we are independent. Whether some other organization, country, or group of people wish to recognize this is up to them, not us.